on.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee. Today's meeting, we've got an agenda that's chock full of things to do. We're going to start with perhaps just an introduction of the members of the committee for those who may not have met them before. Why don't we start with Senator Chittenden?
Tom Chittenden, I work at the University of Vermont. I'm a new senator, so I don't quite know what I'm doing yet, but I hope I'm getting better and not worse.
Seth Chase Colchester. I'm on House Energy and Technology, and I'm a network engineer.
And I'm Marty Feltus from Linden. I serve Linden, Sutton, and Burke, and I serve on the House Appropriations Committee with some oversight over ADS and some other public service options.
And I believe on line, we have Representative Sibilia.
Good morning, Laura Sibilia, representative from Dover, which are the 6 most southern towns along Route 100, vice chair of the Energy and Technology Committee.
And absent today is Senator Chris Pearson from Chittenden. And I'm Senator Redd from District. And I have the pleasure of chairing the committee. The agenda today, we're going to start with the introduction of our new Chief Information Officer for the Judiciary. And Doug Rowe, would you make the introduction, please?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Senator Brock. Good morning, everybody. For the record, my name is Doug Rowe. I'm the previous interim Chief Information Officer for the Vermont Judiciary, and I can say that proudly, and I'm pleased to say that because I can introduce to you the new Chief Technology Innovation Officer, Marcia Shells, who just joined the Judiciary on Monday.
That's right.
Coming to us from ADS. Marcia is, we're executing onboarding activities as we speak, and if you don't mind, Marcia, I'm going to ask you to just give you a little bit of
Sure. So I've been with the state for 3.5 years as part of ADS and serving the Agency of Human Services as the Deputy Director of IT over there. Before moving to Vermont, which I have to say is my favorite state, and that's why I moved here, I was at Yale University in IT for 24 years. And prior to that, I worked a little bit of time in a software company. And before that, I served as an officer in the US Air Force. I have a bachelor's of computer engineering from Boston University, where I did ROTC, and an MBA from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And recently I got a master's of science in business analytics and project management, because business analytics is actually a passion of mine. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm so excited at the point that the Judiciary is at with this implementation of a new system that brings all of the court systems together. And I'm really excited about the types of analytics we'll be able to do and just serving Vermonters better with the modern system. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me here.
Great. Well, thank you and welcome. And we hope you certainly enjoy your new role. And we're going to be obviously speaking with you and working together as time goes on. So thank you again and welcome.
Thanks.
We also have a new Joint Fiscal Office consultant. And so Catherine.
Thanks, I'm Catherine Benner with the Joint Fiscal Office. And if you remember, we were looking for a new IT consultant to review IT projects and operations like Dan Smith. He's retired. And so we have hired Lisa Goffin, and she has started work. She's been working with Dan Smith, and I'll let you give a little history of your background.
Great. Well, I was actually, I started off in IT here in state government, where I was IT director at the Department of Education for 7 years before I moved to a software company. And in that position, I led statewide cross-agency implementations for large IT projects, information systems projects. I also have experience working with the federal home loan banks. They were also developing shared software implementations. And then after serving there, I came and I became a private contractor where I actually was the technical lead on the project for the Agency of Education, which implemented vertical reporting from the school districts to the state servers. So I was the technical lead on that project. So I am very happy to be here. I'm excited to support your work.
And I would just say, we've been working with Dan about getting her integrated into the projects that have been under review. You know, some of them, they're ongoing. So we're working closely to have that trade-off go well and get her up to speed, and also having her start with a smaller, more manageable project to get her feet wet, and then she'll be off and running. And she has anyway, if you have any questions, just reach out to me and we'll put you in touch with her.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And welcome.
Thank you.
We have now a brief discussion of some new federal funding opportunities, and Maria Royal, our counsel from Legislative Council, is here to speak with us. And Catherine, you want to join us? Okay, great.
Morning, everyone. So this is really just to give you an update on some recent funding that is available to the state. So this is under the Capital Projects Fund. This is one of the funding streams that was in ARPA, the American Rescue Plan, which also had the state and local funds from which you appropriated $150 million for broadband under Act 71. So this is a separate fund. Treasury just released guidance this month. I also just want to make sure everyone's clear, this has nothing to do with the current infrastructure bill that's being debated currently. So Mike has posted a link to the Treasury guidance, which you can look at. It's pretty lengthy, but I'm just going to review that at a very high level, mostly for your situational awareness. And then Catherine's going to talk about what the legislature did last session specific to this money and what it's looking to receive in terms of recommendations from the administration, et cetera. So the total amount of money in the Capital Projects Fund is $10 billion. Of that, Vermont is slated to receive $113 million. The state needs to apply for that money by the end of this year. And as part of that application, we'll submit a grant plan for how the money is, and anticipate spending that money. And then the money would actually have to go out by the end of 2022. But those projects, the actual completion of the projects don't need to be completed until I think it's 2026. Okay, so that's just to give you an idea of the timeline.
Is that the end of the federal fiscal year in each of those cases?
It's December 31st.
12/31. So the money has to go out then by 12/31/22.
26. They have to be spent by then.
Yeah, but in terms of the money going out being allocated.
I don't think it has to be that. I think you have to submit plans by next fall. I was talking to Doug Farnham about it. The process of the Treasury, they're still working through exactly what has to be done by this fall, what has to be done by next September. And I think there's time. I think what has to be done by this fall is pretty broad, but that's not, we're still figuring that out. I just want to emphasize that. So
okay.
That's part of the discussions that are going on.
And so it's 12/31/26 though, by which the money has to be spent.
Yes.
Okay.
And so specifically as stated in the federal law and then reiterated in the guidance, these funds need to be used to carry out critical capital projects directly enabling work, education, and health monitoring, including remote options in response to the public health emergency with respect to COVID-19. More specifically related to, in terms of before I get too specific, eligible projects include broadband infrastructure projects, which I'll go over a little bit more in detail in a moment. Also digital connectivity, so devices, equipment, but that ownership of must be retained by the state. So lending devices and that kind of thing to promote connectivity. And then also the funding can be used for multi-purpose community facility projects that enable work and education. So just to get into a little bit more detail on the broadband infrastructure projects, because I know that's obviously been of great interest to this committee. In terms of speed requirements, what the conditions require is that the funding must be used for services that upon project completion reliably meet or exceed symmetrical 100 service. There is, however, an exception. If it is impracticable to meet those speed requirements because of either geography, topography, or excessive cost, then the project must be designed so that it reliably meets or exceeds 120, between 100 download and between 20 and 100 upload, but then be scalable to achieve 100 symmetrical in the future. So also the Treasury is expecting and hoping that projects prioritize last mile connections, so to the premises, but there is the possibility or the consideration of also funding middle mile projects as well. Let's see, I'm not sure how much detail you want to get into. I'll just also mention that there is, the recipients of these funds are encouraged to address affordability, so just potentially use this money for broadband subsidies, in addition to whatever other subsidies are still available through the FCC or the state. That's really, there's obviously a lot more detail, but I think that kind of gives you a sense.
You mentioned there's a document that you have sent us, is that right, that has these details?
Yes, so the guidance itself is linked on the committee's webpage.
Okay.
Mike has done that.
Yep.
But the other thing, I know we don't have a lot of time today, but I did ask Catherine if she could go over in more detail in the capital bill of last year. You anticipated this funding. And so there's some legislative language.
Okay,
Yeah.
please.
So there's, you should have, I think it's posted, Mike has posted, and it's a 2-page document that, and if you look at what I want to bring it to the side with the yellow highlighting, and the bottom half, this is what was in the capital bill. So the capital bill, there was we knew there was 113 million coming. And in the capital context, it was more of talking about buildings and infrastructure. It was unclear what the guidance is going to be, and it's still, I think there's room for all of that. But there was a discussion and negotiation between the executive branch, and the legislature, and judiciary that 113, every branch would have an opportunity to use the 113 million. So if you dropping down to the yellow highlighted, on or before December 15th, the Joint Legislative Management Committee shall recommend a list of priority projects for use of the federal funds for capital projects in the legislative branch. So that may be different than what you all are going to look at, but it may not. I just wanted you to know that that is a piece that is out there related to these funds. The executive branch is in that language, in one right above it, the executive branch just makes their recommendations. And then right below us is the judicial branch makes their recommendations. So this will be an ongoing discussion, especially as people review the guidance and try to figure out what is applicable and what isn't. And the guidance does talk about, there's presumptively eligible projects, there's ineligible projects, and then there's a case-by-case review of projects. I think my guess is that we will have some of both the eligible, but also some collectively as a state, some that will have to do case-by-case review. So that will be an ongoing discussion, figuring out and getting more guidance on what exactly is going to qualify and not qualify. Under CRF, the guidance kept coming out. We kept getting more and more information as time went by. So that this will be an evolving discussion. And the back side of this page is just language actually straight from the guidance. I lifted sort of the key points.
There was a mention, I think, Maria, that you made early on that as far as any equipment, title to that equipment must remain with the state. Is that correct?
Yes, I did reference that. Let me see if I can also find that exact language. So if you happen to be looking at the guidance, it's on page 5. Purchase or installation of devices and equipment to facilitate broadband access. I'm going to skip over some of these words. Where affordability has been identified as a barrier to broadband adoption and use. Devices permitted include laptops, tablets, personal computers, for distribution to members of the public through a short or long-term loan program, or to be made available for use in public facilities. Ownership of the equipment must be maintained by the recipient, the grant recipient or sub-recipient.
Okay. Got it.
Question.
Yes, Representative.
I note that the capital projects must be designed to directly enable work, education, and health monitoring, you've underlined. So it's not just some work projects, some education projects, and some health projects. Each project must be able to answer those three questions. Is that the way it's read them?
And I think that underlining, if I'm correct, came from them, actually.
Okay, okay.
Yes. And so that's where the case by case review, they give some interesting, try to give some examples about how you might, what, like a typical school wouldn't necessarily qualify, but it might qualify if it's somehow meeting all three requirements. There's ways to do it. So that's why I think it's going to be an ongoing discussion, and that would be in the case by case review where I don't know, you might offer health services at a school as well as you know, that might qualify training, work, education, and healthcare.
I understand how a broadband application certainly could apply to all three of those, but I'm struggling to think of other projects that would also apply to all three at the same time. And
I would say the guidance is very clear about broadband. The facility use, they give a few examples, but I think that part is less well defined.
Or multi-purpose community facility projects could answer all three of those questions if you had a senior center as an example or something along those lines. Okay.
So I'm seeing a need in communities to support hybrid meetings for public meetings, municipal meetings, and there's libraries that want to be able to have the AV equipment and that would allow for people to both participate in person as well as remotely, partly related to COVID and health concerns. Is there precedent for the state to maintain ownership of those things, to Senator Brock's point, but still be distributed out into owned by local municipalities, but state still qualifying as the grantor of the owner of the equipment?
Know the answer to that.
You know, I'm thinking about remember the interactive thing we used to have?
The IT.
The IT. It's maybe one example like that. So I believe the state owned all that. Yes. So I think there will be, the answer is we'll figure it out. And if we haven't done exactly this, maybe there are opportunities to see what other states are also doing and how other states are figuring this out. I think if you're talking about providing it, it seems like that would fit in well into what they've been specifically discussing in their guidance.
May I follow up to Representative Feltus's point? Would simply asking participants if they are participating remotely because of a concern with COVID in doing it in a discreet way, or that they're not vaccinated, would that qualify as the health monitoring, and that you would have to incorporate some to meet that need?
I don't feel qualified to answer that question right now. Great question. Health monitoring seems a little unclear to me, a little vague. So
just going back to the timing issue again, you had mentioned, I think, that by the end of this year, there has to be a filing, an application. Is that correct?
That's correct. And
that's a really short period of time given the legislative calendar.
It may, this is the part where I'm unclear exactly what that filing involves. If it is just a filing that the state, yes, is interested in the money and we qualify, it may be as simple as that. It may require more detail. That's what the administration is looking at. And so that's.
If there has to be details of how we want to use the money, for example, whether it be for broadband or for anything else, to kind of create the inventory of what we want, the prioritization and then decision-making by each branch, there's some complexity there.
Yes, I don't think any state look, they just released this September 20th. I don't think everybody is going to figure it out in 3 months exactly how they're going to spend it. So the question is what exactly is required. And it may be as simple as saying, yes, we're a state, we qualify, we want the money. These are the kinds of projects we're considering. And then you go through in the application process. So I think that's the question about what is required, but hopefully it's a very simple request.
And just the approval process, is there any mention of what that approval process, how long it will take and so on?
There's a discussion of the process in there, but I don't know that there's any.
No idea of timelines at all.
Right. I think that you have to submit applicant, and some of them are presumptively eligible. Those are going to be simpler. The case by case review, I imagine we will all be learning at the same time about it.
Okay.
And we've been in touch with NCSL about it as well. So I think all this, all 50 states are going to be having the same discussion. I will say Vermont has once again, as a small state, received per capita more than many other states. So we're in a fortunate position to be having options that other states may not have as well.
But our own legislation asks for 3 priority lists from these 3 different departments by December of this year. And I think we need to, I'm wondering if those 3 groups are actually working on a priority list to be able to have available by December. They need to be reminded, brought to their attention.
I did talk to the Legislative Advisory Committee on the State House, who's working on the State House, future of the State House and how you all, not just for this session, but for the long term. And so they are aware of this language. I
think they want to use all 113 million for the addition to the State House.
Well, nobody's against. I think that was the clear point. So they're focusing on the facility of the State House. I would say not. I don't know if you have other committees that should hear this as well, but that was what they're focusing on.
Okay. I'll just mention at the time that we were expected to have the initial guidance in May, so everything has been delayed.
And for the CUDs, would they be applying through the state and then the state would apply, or is there a direct path?
I'm probably the money would come through the state, would apply for the full 113 and have some plan how the money goes, and then whether it goes to the board that you recently established to then go out and grants. I think some of that detail has yet to.
A lot of the detail as to who does what in order to make any of this happen has yet to be compiled, I guess. And presumably we should expect to see that shortly, but
we'll expect to see it, I think. I'll leave it there.
well, please do keep us posted.
Yes.
Obviously, this is an important issue for us, certainly as we think about broadband and some of the other issues that relate to IT. Any other questions from the committee? Well, great. Well, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda today is we have a public comment. And here we have at the request of Mr. Stephen Whitaker, who is a longtime advocate, and I think the committee knows, wanted to have a few minutes to discuss some issues with the committee, and he is here today. And so Steve Whitaker.
Well, thank you, Senator, for the invitation. As you're well aware, I have been working on this for 30 years, trying to get a telecom plan that would actually get established solutions to the goals that have been in statute for most of that time. Primarily, I call your attention to the goal of competition, because we have learned again and again that monopolies lead to deteriorating customer service and accelerating prices. And competition, I believe, is universally accepted as the best strategy to make sure you get good service. I have taken the liberty of making copies of 202C, which, in the absence of a credible and complete telecommunications plan, which we have not had since 2004, these state policies and goals need to guide our decisions. And we don't have a mechanism to make that happen. The Vermont Community Broadband Board is proceeding as if these goals and policies don't apply to their initiative. They're talking as if Act 71 is the only thing they need to pay attention to. They're ignoring competition, open access, and they're not equipped to deal with the resiliency issues. So I will point to one bright spot on that Community Broadband Board direction is the Washington Electric Co-op model, where Washington Electric, the distribution utility, is partnering with a communications district. And the electric utility is going to build the fiber. May or may not be with rural utility service funding. I have questions about whether they're going to be able to obtain that funding, being that there's no payment track record for CD fiber, the communications union district, to pay that back. So you may see Washington Electric needing to change course and apply to the Vermont Community Broadband Board for the money to build that fiber. I think that's 83 million. But that model can support competition, provided it's engineered from the start to support competition, meaning enough fibers are put in place in the right direction with the right ring architectures for resiliency to allow competitors to build off of that network. Right now, we've in effect teased the communications union districts to think that they're going to have a monopoly, or they're going to be able to grant a monopoly. Witness the Northeast Kingdom or Waitsfield, thinking they now have a monopoly to build infrastructure with public funds, and they will be the only ones riding on it across Addison County. That is not the case. That's not consistent with law, and it requires some intervention and clarification by legislation next January, and or a clear statement of policy from this board that can be. So I did send an earlier document. I hope you all have had a chance to read it. I follow that one with this one, which is really what would it look like to get it on track? And in the sense that you've only have 15 minutes available today, I would really ask you to pick 3 or pick 5 off here that you want me to discuss, because there's pretty much a roadmap of how to get to where we need to go. But fundamentally, we have, short of a statewide engineered design, for instance, the new consolidated fiber network built in Barre, Montpelier, Brattleboro, that's not designed to support competition, and it's not designed with any adherence or consideration of the resilience that we will need to support public safety communications or infill cellular. In fact, the consolidated technicians are in here scratching their heads about the out-of-state contractors that came in here and built it and didn't document it, and they're trying to figure out what was built. It's kind of a mess. And that's the argument for a statewide engineered design, which was authorized in Act 71, but it was made optional so as to not delay the progress of the CUDs. In reality, the workforce availability is going to be what bottlenecks the deployment of fiber. So we have an opportunity, we just haven't realized it yet, to get the statewide design completed by next spring while the legislature is still in session. And then that will spur the integration of planning with these other telehealth and education, these initiatives that you just heard about from the prior witness. That in effect, the federal money Treasury guidance is in effect insisting that we do some integrated planning, and we do not have a body doing that right now. We've got a loose cannon of a new broadband board that doesn't understand that it needs to comply with statute. So so first on this list is clarify that both Act 71 and 202C are equally to be adhered to by the Community Broadband Board, supporting competition and open access. That will necessitate them to rewrite their business plans. The business plans of these CUDs were done before the RDOF, the FCC Rural Digital Opportunity Fund auction. So the economics that were presumed when they got their broadband innovation grants for planning, for business plans and feasibility studies, those are no longer up to date. We have the most mature communications union district in the state is EC Fiber, but they're $50 million in debt, and EC and Consolidated is proposing to overbuild that territory, most of that territory. And we could see our first CUD failure just based on that. If Consolidated comes in with a $35 a month offering and a third or a half of the people migrate, you could see EC Fiber unable to pay its $50 million in debt. So I'm just raising that as a caution. And this is where a statewide plan done in the model of Huntsville, Alabama, St. Louis, Missouri, a statewide engineered fiber plan accounts for all the existing fiber that's already there. So we don't need to build where there's fiber already there and available. And an economic model can be built along with it that takes into account all the cellular backhaul, the radio transmission for public safety, et cetera. So you can see your revenue streams and know what's feasible to build in what order. The governor has a priority of infill of cellular. And in a rural state, the only economical way to get infill cellular is to share infrastructure. That necessitates the state taking a lead role in awarding a contract to a neutral host operator that has roaming agreements with all carriers. And we had a start of that based on outdated technology with Coverage Co. But there's no reason that an LTE, modern 4G LTE neutral host couldn't be built now to infill and to provide an interim solution until this fiber gets built. It looks like it's going to take 3 to 5 years to build out all this fiber, even if we get the electric utilities to do it. The electric utilities are the logical host, owner, manager, and maintenance contractor for the fiber. They can build in the electric space. They own the poles. They don't need to do make ready. They don't need to do pole inventories. They can build higher up and get it done quicker and cheaper, and then just lease it to a CUD. So that model really needs to be explored, and it hasn't been because Washington Electric isn't farther enough on its trajectory to show the benefits of that prospect. Is there anything you see on here that you really want me to talk to? Because I've got about 6 minutes left. Halt the transfer of state-owned fiber until you get a statewide resiliency plan of where does Velco's network already have adequate resiliency, pointing out that Velco's network is owned 51% by Vermont ratepayers. So we need to assert and clarify and even determine whether they're subject to public records laws. But Velco's network has a lot of resilient fiber rings around the state, but where they don't have them, where do we need to add on? And should we be giving away the fiber that the state already owns to the CUDs when they have no capacity to manage or lease? We could end up or potentially even mobilize a repair contractor quick enough when something goes down to put mission critical communications on them. Mission critical meaning police, fire safety, radio. We have to anticipate climate change and major storms, floods, hurricanes. So that was scheduled the fiber was scheduled to be transferred to CUDs who asked for it by September 30th. So they were scrambling to say, give us the fiber. A fiscal note was not done. There's no appraisal of the value of it. There's no analysis of the lost revenue that the state has been taking in, nor the potential revenue for the CUD to take in. It was just reckless legislating to say, give that fiber away, because we spent years and many, many millions of dollars building it. And it was all on the rationale that if the CUDs had some assets, maybe they could be better borrowing money. That's not a bankable proposition. I think I've covered a lot. Coordinate integration of federally funded initiatives for schools, libraries, telehealth, and rural broadband is essential. Similarly, again, I'm going to call attention to interim measures we could take. If we infill the cellular, the canopy, infill cellular with a neutral host model, neutral host would have Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, and US Cellular all on it simultaneously. That's what we had with Coverage Code. The deployment of those LTE radios could also serve interim fixed wireless broadband to the customers. The customers that need it now and can't wait 5 years. I would say no one can wait 5 years in this situation. So an interim solution using fixed wireless is the most rapidly deployed and most economical. And that's been pitched to you by Peter Blum, by Fred Interada. I forgot his name at the moment. But some of your committees have heard of that. Similarly, Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi deployments that we did were haphazard at best. There was some good equipment, but nobody inventoried what speed we're connecting them to. We could have put a Wi-Fi access point into a library and connected it to a DSL line, which makes it very useless to the, more than one person connecting to it. There's no reason with all the fiber connected anchor institutions, the schools and libraries, there's no reason we couldn't put gigabit service to support these Wi-Fi access points within months if we got set to do it. And that would then have the reliability and the range to support a lot of folks who might need to travel away to school, but from school to get this access. Gigabit speed backhaul for Wi-Fi is the second to last bullet. Community anchor institutions, including both public and private libraries. If you don't only do public libraries. Some of the public libraries are supported by John Quinn's shop. He's got a half-time FTE because of a funding stream that came from Microsoft years ago. That's called Fiber Connect, I think. But expanding upon that model, reaching the public and private libraries, putting gigabit Wi-Fi in as many places as we can for right now. That combined with mobile wireless infill serving dual purpose as fixed wireless. And one potential operator has offered to allow all the fixed wireless revenue to go to the CUDs, and that operator would get the mobile wireless revenue. So what's lacking is planning. It's not sufficient for the committees of jurisdiction or the oversight committee to say this is too complex, we can't do it, so what, we'll waste the money. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity with hundreds of millions of dollars, and we need to use this to catalyze long overdue integrated planning. Workforce training should start now and position Vermont as the destination nationwide for people to come and get trained as linemen, as wireless operators, and as installers. BTC lacks the vision, but the broadband board has discretionary money available to fund that, thanks to your and Senator Sorotkin's amendment to that. Is that enough, or you got any questions?
Well, the one question is of the type of planning and direction change that you are suggesting, who should do that?
Who should convene it would be the governor needs to, because you've got to.
What organization? Is there an organization or structure
right
that exists right now that could do?
Reconvene the Office of Policy Research and Coordination that existed until Governor Dean dismantled it. But that is where healthcare reform, that's where planning, Act 200 planning came out of. The Policy Research and Coordination was a governor level office that integrated across agencies and industries. And in order to get the utilities on board to get this fiber built quickly and economically, you need that level of engagement. So I don't see the capacity either at the broadband board or at the public service department, but I could see it by harnessing V-Trans. V-Trans has enormous capacity and they have a stake in this. Intelligent vehicle highway transportation systems are going to rely on this broadband, and the quicker we get that deployed, the more rapidly we can reap the advantages of this broadband.
Well, I know you've made your presentation or parts of it to other organizations within government and to individuals. Certainly, as far as we're concerned, we have a limited amount of time today, but we obviously will take your suggestions into account. We will discuss them, and there may be more testimony about what you've testified on today in a future meeting. So
yeah, I would welcome an opportunity to elaborate on these things. I just 15 minutes.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you very, very much for coming today. And does any member have any other questions or comments before we move on to the next item?
Just right quick, everything that you mentioned today was taken as testimony when the last bill was going through and reviewed, weighed against the priorities and the available funds. What additional revenue streams have you identified that would pay for these?
Pay for which?
Any of the things that were left on the table? Like full 100 or throughout the state, Wi-Fi, infill, et cetera.
The additional money that's that Maria just spoke to, Mary and Catherine just spoke to, that additional 100 million.
That's being divided amongst all the state projects, yeah.
Okay, well, there's also another 100 million small state minimum in the infrastructure bill, which is probably not going to get voted on today in Congress. And there are substantial, huge sums in education and healthcare that are not integrated, not even visible. So it's by linking these initiatives together, all of which are trying to build and rely on broadband, that we can assemble the funding pool to make this possible. But a key point I need to make is that the current legislation only allows CUDs and requires CUDs to plan for unserved areas that don't have cable. That's in violation. That's inconsistent with the statute, which says we're going to get fiber speed connectivity to every address.
Well, no, it prioritizes those who don't have access. It doesn't prohibit areas.
It doesn't prohibit, but they're not, the definition of the universal service plan does not mean, right now, it doesn't require them to have a plan to serve every address with fiber. And that
we need to change the universal service plan. Is that what you're saying?
You need to change the definition so that the CUDs provide a plan to reach everybody with fiber, even if they're not ready to build it yet. But it will not be possible to design and engineer and build one set of fiber and then come back and say, oh, now we have to go back and redo a new plan for the denser, more profitable areas.
So if we want to do universal service to everybody, why would we then want to allow other people to overbuild it with competition? If we're going to build a bigger project to reach everybody.
Sir, your engineer role for consolidated necessitates, you've got a conflict on this issue that I can't address.
I haven't worked on a project in Vermont in years.
The statute currently reads that we want competition as a way to drive service quality up and prices down and not soon outmoded. I warned that the 10-100 goal that was inserted into the statute, or not into statute, but into the congressional legislation, 10-100 is not sufficient. That was put in to allow Comcast to compete, but we need to be shooting for gigabit and 10 gigabit service, which I know Consolidated is marketing now here in Montpelier.
Okay, well, we've now expended the time, but thank you very much for coming today, and we will move on with our agenda. We've spoken a number of times before about cybersecurity and resiliency issues and the importance of that to the state. The session that we're going to have at this point will be done in executive session because we will be discussing material that is confidential and is exempt from disclosure under the Public Records Act. Maria, do you have any specific comment about going into executive session and the rules associated with it, the reasons therefore? Just a comment at this point.
I think you're right that discussion on security issues does fall under allows you to go into an executive session. So if you want to make a motion to do that for that purpose.
And is there a motion?
I would so move.
Senator Chittenden, the motion to go into executive session, seconded by Representative Chase, and all those in favor of so doing?
Aye.
Aye. So we're now going into executive session. We will come back into a public session, at least as a minimum to adjourn once the executive session is over. In the executive session today, we will ask those members, those folks from the three branches that are involved with data security, information security, who are present in the room today to remain, as well as our new consultant for JFO to remain, and then our counsel to remain. And then we will close the session otherwise. Now, in a joint committee session, only those members of the committee who are present physically will be a participant in that session. We will not have a remote connection, again, for reasons of security concerns about the security of the Zoom platform to be able to conduct such sessions. So unfortunately, the representative who is with us by Zoom will not be able to participate in the remainder of the executive session. So we're ready to adjourn to executive session, and thank you for those who